The historian Jean Hannay, in his book Myths, Rites and Symbols, wrote, "In all cultures we find the same irrepressible desire to attain the invisible. Visible life needs, in order to be coherent and to make sense, a reference to the invisible world where it comes from. In any place or historical period, we repeatedly find in symbols universal means to reveal the underlying presence of the invisible in the manifested world." Chinese medicine, as we will discuss later, contemplates man from its origins. In its vision, the world would come from a primordial chaos known as Handan. In their conception, within such primordial chaos, archetypes would develop themselves to allow and ensure the transmission of the ultimate origin of life to the manifested world, following pre-established guidelines. What is an archetype? The word's etymology comes from the Greek arche, meaning origin, and type, that is, type, example, or ideal model. So the archetypes would be the models that would inspire from things and phenomena to dynamics and behaviors in the manifested world. The same archetypes existed in all traditional cultures. Thus, without understanding their primordial symbolic function, we are missing again substantial information in the classical text of Chinese medicine. I am trying to convey the idea that Chinese medicine requires a symbolic reading, as Jean Hannay states in his Myths, Rites and Symbols book. So, going further, what is a symbol? We always have to go back to the etymology. The word symbol comes from symbolon. The symbolon was a coin divided in two in a predetermined way, and whose halves were delivered to a group of people so as, although later separated, those who owned that piece of coin would be able to recognize themselves as belonging to such a group by bringing together the two parts of the symbolon. What does this mean? It means that the initial drawing of the original concept is evoked by and can be deducted from its symbol. We are not to include in this exposition the symbolism of numbers, but just as an introduction, in Chinese medicine, the one symbolizes the whole. Its totality is fragmented into two, and therefore, when divided into two, the symbolon belongs to the manifested world. So 2 is the first number that begins to symbolize the duality of life. We shall see an example of this in the yin-yang theory. And just as Plato said that the sensitive world was a projection, so to speak, of the ideal types of the ideal world, we will now see how the principles described in Chinese culture, for example, the yin-yang laws, really do translate into everything in our own world. The symbol would therefore be a way to connect the visible with the incomprehensible but ultimate reality itself. Hence the importance to understand what is the meaning of the symbols contained in the Chinese texts. I would like now to show you an example of symbolism and archetypes in a classic acupuncture text. Su Wen, in chapter 5, says, "Heaven is the essence of things, earth is its form. Thus, one and the other are, respectively, the father and mother of creation." That is, heaven would represent the pre-existing reality, while the earth concept would express the multiplicity of forms. And not only this, remember that the text follows, "They are thus father and mother of creation." So, the figure of the father is the archetype that is transmitting the concept heaven, and the mother is the archetype transmitting the concept of the earth. So, what would you now think about the Christian culture when it states, Father, the Creator? Father, the Creator. In fact, the terms earth, mother, and also uterus are synonymous in symbolic language. Hence, in man, the concepts of heaven and earth are personified in the figures of father and mother. I didn't want to skip this introduction, as I find it of extreme importance to point out the opposite epistemological approach between the model of inferring reality for the ancient Chinese with respect to our own. In our contemporary Western culture, the approach to knowledge is empirical. That is, objects, facts, and relationships between them are examined in detail, and from this experience we attempt to explain their dynamics. Therefore, ours is knowledge that, starting from the concrete, inducts what the rules would be from the bottom up. Unlike traditional cultures, which had a conceptual approach to reality, this means that traditional cultures established principles by trying to find out by ideas what were the principles that governed things, but from here, the realization was the consequence, the inescapable deduction of what the principle had already established as a rule. Thus, the epistemological approach of traditional sciences was top-down. Obviously, these are two approaches that put the emphasis of the origin, that is, to what which is given more credibility, in opposite poles. We in the concrete and tangible, traditional cultures in the intangible and conceptual. Plato also stated that the greater the abstraction, the greater the reality. Let's look at a small example expressed in the classic of Rites belonging to the Confucian school. To examine things in depth, just investigate the source. The rest can be deducted by analogy. Applied to Chinese medicine, this approach means that the functioning of the body in the human being, its dynamics and relationships, all of these are the embodiment in the subject of archetypal laws that guide the functioning of everything in the world. From the cosmos, a word that means universe in order, to us, who would be a microcosm within the macrocosm in which we are enrolled.